In the heart of the African plains, nestled among rolling hills and ancient trees, there lay a village, a place of quiet simplicity, where the days were long and life moved with the rhythm of the earth. But on this night, under the silvery glow of a full moon, something stirred in the stillness, a force unseen, a story waiting to unfold. A woman, once thought to be a poor widow, stood before a grand palace, watching it rise from the earth as though summoned by magic. The villagers, who had never seen such wealth in their lives, gathered in awe and confusion. But what they didn't know was that the woman, who had lived in misery for years, was about to change the course of her destiny and that of her husband forever. Amina was once the pride of her village, a beautiful, kind-hearted woman beloved by all. She married a man named Sefu, a strong and hard-working farmer. Together, they built a humble but comfortable life. Their home was filled with laughter, love, and hope. But as years passed, something changed in Sefu. The man who once cherished Amina began to grow distant, his heart consumed by a hunger for wealth and status. For all of Amina's love and patience, Sefu could not see past his own ambitions. One day, a wealthy merchant arrived in the village, offering Sefu a way out of his modest life. The merchant promised him riches beyond imagination, but only if he gave up his wife and remarried into a wealthier family. The temptation was too strong for Sefu to resist, and he betrayed Amina, abandoning her for the promise of fortune. Amina, devastated by her husband's betrayal, was left alone in the village. The people who once admired her now whispered behind her back, pitying her for being abandoned. With no family and no wealth, she lived in sorrow, barely surviving on the scraps of others' generosity. But Amina had something that no one knew, a deep wisdom inherited from her grandmother, a powerful sorceress who had taught her the ancient ways of magic. Despite her sorrow, Amina never lost her strength. She carried her pain in silence, knowing that one day fate would give her the opportunity for vengeance or perhaps redemption. Her heart, though broken, never stopped believing that one day justice would be served. Years passed, and Amina's life remained the same. She lived in a modest hut on the edge of the village, far from the lavish estates where the wealthy and powerful resided. Her former husband Sefu now enjoyed the comforts of wealth, his new wife bearing him children, his life seemingly perfect. But Amina had heard rumors. The merchant who had made such promises to Sefu had tricked him, taking away not just his soul but also his wealth. The land Sefu had once owned was now barren, and the riches he had hoped for were nothing more than empty promises. Yet, he was too proud to admit his mistakes and return to Amina. Amina's heart burned with a mix of anger and sorrow as she heard these rumors. But she was no fool. She knew that her revenge, if she sought it, would have to be something unimaginable, something that would strike at the very core of Sefu's pride. And so she began to make her plans. Late one evening, under the cover of darkness, Amina began her work. She gathered the rare herbs and magical stones that her grandmother had once taught her to use. She chanted ancient incantations, calling upon the spirits of the land, the wind, and the stars. The ground beneath her feet trembled, and in that moment Amina knew that the impossible was within her grasp. As dawn broke, she felt the weight of her magic settle into the earth. The villagers, still asleep, would awaken to a sight that would change their lives forever. The next morning, as the sun rose over the horizon, the village stirred to life. Children ran through the streets, their laughter filling the air, unaware of the miracle that had taken place overnight. And then they saw it. In the distance, just beyond the village, a towering palace gleamed in the sunlight. It was a sight unlike anything the villagers had ever seen, a structure of unimaginable beauty and wealth, with golden pillars, marble floors, and intricate carvings that told stories of ancient kings and queens. The palace seemed to have risen from the earth itself, as if by some divine force. At the heart of the palace stood Amina, her face serene, her eyes glowing with the power of her magic. She had done it. In a single night, she had built a palace, a testament to the strength that had been forged in her heart over the years of suffering and betrayal. But the shock didn't end there. As Amina stood before the palace, she saw a familiar face in the crowd, a face she had not seen in years. It was Sefu, her husband, now a broken man. His once proud and handsome features had withered, his clothes tattered, his eyes filled with shame. He had come to see the palace, hoping to claim it for himself, believing it was a gift from the gods. When he saw Amina standing there, the truth hit him like a bolt of lightning. The woman he had abandoned had risen to power far beyond what he could ever have dreamed. And the palace that now stood before him was not just a symbol of wealth, it was a symbol of the power he had given up for a lie. Sefu stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest. He had never imagined this day would come. Amina, the woman he had discarded, now stood before him as a queen. His once simple life, built on lies and false promises, had crumbled, and in its place stood Amina's power, a power he could never understand. But pride is a dangerous thing, and Sefu was not one to admit defeat. He swore to himself that he would not let Amina's success go unchallenged. With a burning anger in his chest, he began plotting how to reclaim what he believed was rightfully his, no matter the cost. Sefu sought out the richest merchant in the region, offering him a large sum of money in exchange for an army of men who would help him reclaim the palace. He knew it would not be easy, but his desperation clouded his judgment. He was willing to risk everything to prove that he had not been wrong to abandon Amina. In his mind, if he could destroy her, he could rebuild his life, his reputation, and his lost honor. The day of confrontation arrived, and the village buzzed with anticipation. Sefu, backed by a group of mercenaries, marched toward the palace, determined to take control. The villagers watched in shock as he approached Amina's majestic home, ready to wage war for what he believed was his. But Amina was prepared. She had known this day would come. As Sefu and his men reached the gates, a fierce wind blew, and the earth trembled beneath their feet. The palace, once a symbol of triumph, now seemed to pulse with an ancient energy, one that no man could defeat. Sefu called for his men to storm the gates, but as they stepped forward, they were met with a powerful force. One by one, they were thrown back, unable to get closer to the palace. It was as if the very land itself was protecting Amina. Finally, Sefu stood before her, his eyes filled with fury. "You cannot keep this," he shouted. "This was meant to be mine." Amina looked at him, her expression calm. "You gave up everything for wealth. But now you see that wealth is not what defines a person's worth. It is strength, resilience, and the ability to rise when all seems lost." Sefu's face twisted in anger and regret, but there was nothing he could do. The truth was clear. Amina had become more than just the woman he had abandoned. She had become a force that could not be tamed. As Sefu left the palace, defeated and broken, the village watched in awe. They had seen the true power of Amina, not the magic, but the strength of her spirit. She had turned betrayal into triumph, proving that no matter how deeply life wounds us, we always have the power to rise. Amina never sought revenge for revenge's sake. Instead, she built her palace as a symbol of resilience, of the power of a woman who had been wronged but refused to let it define her. Her story would be told for generations, not as a tale of vengeance, but as a story of strength, wisdom, and redemption. Meanwhile, Sefu, who had once been so full of pride and ambition, returned to a life of humility. His marriage crumbled as he was left with nothing but the bitter taste of regret. He wandered from village to village, searching for meaning, but never finding peace. The wealth he had craved so desperately was lost to him forever, and in its place, he realized that the love of a kind, faithful woman was more valuable than anything gold could buy. Years later, as Amina sat in the garden of her palace, watching the children of the village play, she thought back on the pain she had endured. There had been nights when she had wondered if she would ever recover from the wounds Sefu had inflicted on her. But in that moment, as she watched the sunset over the horizon, she knew the truth: she had won. She had risen above the betrayals and heart touches, turning them into the foundation for a life that was richer than anything money could provide. The power of resilience, of believing in oneself even when the world turned its back, had been her greatest gift. And now, her story was not one of sorrow, but of strength. This story teaches us that life may deal us harsh hands, and people we love may betray us in ways that break our hearts. But it is in those moments of despair that we discover who we truly are. Amina's journey is a powerful reminder that our worth does not lie in the material wealth we possess or in the approval of others. It lies in our ability to overcome, to rise above hardship, and to find strength in our own hearts. Amina's palace wasn't just a building of stone and gold, it was the manifestation of her spirit, unbreakable, unyielding, and wise. The lesson we learn from her story is that no matter how dark the path may seem, we always have the power to rebuild our lives, to rise again, and to create something beautiful from the ruins. As years passed, Amina grew older, but her wisdom only deepened. She became a revered figure, not just for her magical abilities or her remarkable story, but for the lessons she imparted to the young ones of the village. The children, who once heard only whispers of her past, now sat at her feet, learning about resilience, courage, and the importance of self-love. Amina's legacy was no longer just a palace of stone, it was the hearts she touched, the lives she changed, and the hope she inspired. As the years drew on, Amina's body grew frail, but her spirit remained as strong as ever. One evening, in the quiet of her palace, surrounded by the garden she had once tended to with her own hands, Amina closed her eyes for the last time. Her life had come full circle, from a woman betrayed and abandoned to the queen of her own destiny. And as she left this world, she did so in peace, knowing that her legacy would live on, not in the walls of her palace, but in the hearts of those she had touched. Years passed, and the village continued to thrive under the guidance of the wisdom Amina had left behind. Her palace stood tall as a monument to her strength, but more importantly, it stood as a reminder to all who passed by that even the darkest of times could be transformed into something beautiful. And as the villagers told her story to their children and their children's children, they remembered not just the magic that had helped Amina rise, but the magic that lived within her, the unshakable belief in her own worth and the power of her spirit. Let Amina's story remind us all that, no matter what we face, we are never truly defeated. The power to change our lives is always within us, and sometimes the most unexpected journeys lead us to the most extraordinary destinations. And in the end, it is not wealth, status, or revenge that defines us, it is our strength, our resilience, and our capacity to turn pain into purpose.